We're going to let people come on in over the next 30 seconds or so, and then we'll get started. Listen to a little Justin Timberlake. Sunny day outside, snow's melting. Nice day in Montana. All right, we have people coming in from the waiting room. I think we're ready to go ahead and get started, and people just keep joining us. So welcome, everyone. Today, we're thrilled to be starting a Tuesday Talks today. I'm Kimberly Dudek, the CEO and founder of the Public Policy Institute of the Rockies, and I'm here today with Pipper's co-founder and CFO, Sophie Moon. We're hosting these Tuesday Talks as a way to further the Public Policy Institute of the Rockies' mission of bringing attention to underaddressed issues in Montana, letting you know some of the people working on them, and giving you the opportunity to learn how to be involved. You can also ask questions that you can actually get answers to. Today, we're thrilled to be talking with two guests. The talk will be recorded, and you can post questions to them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And they also will be recorded as a podcast released later and also available on MCAT. So today we're thrilled to have with us two guests. Sierra Pinnell is Empower Montana's Youth Program Specialist. She's focusing on BIPOC youth programs, and Kelsey Severson, our other guest, is Empower Montana's Associate Director of Development and Grants. Sierra moved to Montana in middle school and as a Black woman learned firsthand the lack of diversity and racial injustice faced by Montana's youth. Kelsey was born and raised in Missoula and grew up fighting for workers' rights from a stroller with her dad, a high school teacher and union organizer. Both Sierra and Kelsey started as practicum students and interns while attending the University of Montana, Sierra in 2018 and Kelsey in 2014. Both women were drawn to Empower Montana due to their backgrounds in social justice, which also led them both to serve on the board of the Public Policy Institute of the Rockies. We're thrilled to have both of them as board members. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thrilled to have you on here. We're excited to be talking. So I gave just an intro, but why don't you tell us about some of the work you're doing at Empower Montana? And later we're going to start talking more about the anti-Asian American and Pacific Islander issues you've been working on. But why don't you just go ahead and tell us about Empower Montana and what you're doing there?
Yeah, so Empower Montana, our mission is really to create a more just and inclusive society. And we do this by working with both youth and adult leaders that work to end mistreatment and correct systemic injustice. And so we do this in kind of three main ways. We work with youth in schools, and that work looks a lot like, anti-bullying and talking about, doing school climate assessments, learning about what is going on at different schools. We also have some constituency groups for LGBTQ+ and BIPOC, which Sierra can talk more in depth about. And then we also do organizations and businesses. That's kind of our second tier of work. And right now we're doing a lot of READY trainings, which are racial equity, access, diversity, and inclusion. A lot of organizations are interested in reformatting some of their EEO policies and that kind of stuff. And then for community, we've worked with a number of community organizations doing communication skill building, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we do a couple of community events as well. We do our MLK Day, which is a community celebration, and also we have some youth leadership during that celebration as well. And then we also have Diversity Day, which we just had a couple Saturdays ago, that is all about celebrating youth leadership and celebrating the non-discrimination ordinance that was passed in Missoula, thanks to our LGBTQ+ youth.
Great. Well, so tell us, how did you become involved in the work at Empower Montana and in these issues?
Yeah. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So I was looking at internships in college, and I found Empower Montana, or I guess I should say my mom had always had Empower Montana come and do trainings at the city of Missoula. She was the human resources director there for a while. And I started, and I wanted to help with development, and I just loved the mission, and I had a little bit of background in development and stuff, but I learned to write grants, and it just kind of went from there. And I never wanted to leave, so I never did. And I just kept volunteering and working with them until in 2017, I got hired as the grant writer. And since then, my role has kind of morphed and things from there. But yeah, that's how I got started here.
Yeah, I initially heard about Empower I was doing an internship, a racial justice internship at the YWCA. And so I got to do a little bit of work with Empower my junior year of college. And then my senior year, I had to do a practicum, and I just knew that I wanted to work with them. And thankfully I got it. And then I was also able to do a racial justice internship here as well. And yeah, I did that for about a year and a half, and then I left, and then I came back, and now so I'm here again, and it's awesome.
Well, we're both glad that we're glad that you're both there. So we talked about, and you talked about racial injustice and some of that work. In the climate we're living in right now, especially in Montana, why is that so important?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, at least from my experience in Missoula, they really think that we're like, oh, it's really great, it's really awesome, like everything's great. There's no like racial, like racism here. And I think the further people look, the more they realize that's not true. And that there's a lot of subtle things, and there's also a lot of like overt things that are happening in our towns and all across Montana. And so I think it's really important that people are starting to realize that, and then coming to us with a lot of questions that we can hopefully answer for them. Just really trying to create that inclusive space for everyone.
Yeah, and Montana is not very diverse. We are mostly white, and a lot of people choose to ignore that we have, a lot of issues between tribal communities and rural communities that are, right next to one another. And they don't really always see that as racial injustice, although it is, and it is the most blatant form of kind of racial injustice that we see in Montana. But yeah, we're kind of here to talk about all types of oppression and how they connect to one another, so we can build this larger network of allyship for all BIPOC, for all people of color.
Okay. Well, and so let's start talking about that. Let's talk about specifically what we're seeing first with there were some shootings, unfortunately, too much in the U.S., but recently targeting the Asian American population. So what kind of work are you doing with that, the Asian American Pacific Islander or AAPI work, and what's going on here in Montana regarding that?
I was, from my perspective, I work with youth. Most of my work is just direct service with youth. And so I think it's really, at least encouraging for me with the youth that I work with. I think they are also very concerned about it, and they're very willing to learn about it and just get that knowledge and like put it in their tool belt so that they can address it in their communities. And so I think on my front, it's just really equipping the youth with tools to address it. So I think that's mostly what I've seen on my front, but.
Yeah, so we're really doing, we've been asked to do a couple kind of communication skill buildings, and we thought we'd share kind of some of our communication tactics that we use. Beyond that, our racial justice engagement specialist, Alex Kim, is Korean American, and he has been doing a lot of work surrounding this because he feels really passionate about it, connected to his identity. So I know he's done some interviews on KPAX, so we can definitely share out too. We've shared out on our social media where he's really talked about it from a personal aspect. But yeah, we've mostly been trying to just give people skills to really, try to help and protect Asian American Pacific Islanders when you're, out and about in your everyday life, and also to correct some of the misinformation when, you have a family member that might refer to coronavirus as the Kung flu or whatever it may be.
So what are some of those skills that you're talking about? Like if the people who are listening, they want to know what to do, what can you tell them?
Yeah. One of our skills is called stopping the behavior. And that still is more of just a quick little fix. Someone says something that really offends you, and it's really trying to be like, hey, like, I noticed you said that. That really hurts my feelings. Could you not use that word around me, or could you not say that phrase around me? It's just a quick little like, hey, please don't do that. That's one of our skills that we like to use if you just really need to do something quick. And then we have another skill called shifting attitudes. And that one's more of like a deep, like conversation. You really like, maybe it's a close like friend or family member that maybe says something like Kelsey said, and you're like, hold on, like, let's get to the root of why you said that. Let's get to that misinformation. And that can also be like a really long conversation, right? Or very ongoing. Like, it's not like, oh, you have this conversation and suddenly they never say it again. It's something that you're always going to like come back to and wait until they kind of relearn something.
Yeah, and stopping the behavior can be used too. We were attending a virtual training, which we also want to shout out, a group called Hollaback. They do kind of an ending all kind of street harassment. And we, taking their training, we found that we really liked, they have a distract option too in their kind of list of stopping the behaviors. And I find that to be really helpful, especially a lot of people have asked me about this issue because they've just like been running and they, wave at everybody or say hi to everybody on the trail they're running at. And they find that people that they perceive to be Asian American are kind of shying away from them or feeling weird about saying anything. And so if you're seeing anybody out in the community that is being even just disrespectful, but even, outright violent or racist, yelling at Asian Americans, if you're able, you might not be able to, tell them to stop directly, but you can interject yourself into the situation if you feel safe doing that. Maybe it's at the grocery store and you put your cart in between those two people, or you might call out a name and try to get in between the situation and you're, just talking over them. So you're giving them an out. And then if you can, checking on the individual that is Asian American and seeing how they're doing and talking to them and letting them know, I'm really sorry that happened. How are you feeling? Do you need anything? How can I help?
Also, another one of the skills from that training that was really great too is that they say to delegate is one of the things. And so, you don't always have to be the person like interjecting yourself or being the one to stop something. You can, if you don't feel safe or just like that's not your thing, like you're more introvert, you can delegate to be like, hey, do you feel comfortable saying something or doing something about this? Because I don't, but I saw it happen. So I think that's super important too, because I know some people are like, oh, I'm so nervous to like interject myself in that, but there are people that is their skill. So to delegate that is great too.
Or for thinking about it, like, you as a person of color, not wanting to get into this situation, but you're with me, for instance, and we can talk about it and I can go be the person to stand in front since I am white. Or I'm thinking, my husband is, 6 feet tall and kind of a burly military type dude. And so for him to go stand in front of somebody and, kind of be that person that's distracting or in between or telling them to stop might be a little more, forceful notice or message.
Okay. What are some of the instances of anti-Asian American violence or discrimination that has actually been happening in Montana that you may have heard about?
Good question.
I had heard from a friend who runs quite a bit. She's a marathoner, but she is always super polite and friendly and she's waving at everybody. And she had said that she markedly is noticing that Asian Americans on the trail will kind of shy away from her when she says hi, or they won't want to interact, or they'll walk off. So she was wondering too what was happening. And I think even if there's not a ton of it happening right now here, it's really all the other situations are really impacting Asian Americans. So even just reaching out now if you know anybody that is Asian American Pacific Islander, and asking them how they are and how they're doing is a good thing to do too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know any specific situations, but yeah, I would just echo what Kelsey said, and just checking in on people of that identity, and really just being like, what is going on? Like, how can I support you in that? Because sometimes I think, as a person of color, not always willing to be like, this is what's happening to me, and like, listen to all of this, and can you believe this? Because I don't know, it's just like something that's going on with you internally, and you don't really necessarily always want to speak it out. So really just being that welcoming person to your BIPOC friends and saying, hey, I'm always here if you need to talk, or if you need me to do something any way I can support.
So you'd said this is part of really a larger conversation about non-discrimination and inclusion and diversity. So tell us specifically about the programs you have at Empower Montana, and then how people can be involved.
Yeah. Specifically for our youth programs, we have a couple youth programs. We have our EPIC group, which stands for Empowering People, Inspiring Change, and that is for middle schoolers. And that is really just focusing on youth leadership and building up their knowledge and skills. And then we have our Youth Forward and BU crew, which is our LGBTQ plus groups for high schoolers and then younger youth. And that's just really focusing again on that like community and coming together as a group that shares an identity together. And then we have our ABBY group, which stands for Association of BIPOC Youth. And that is for any 13 through 18-year-old BIPOC person in Montana to come and learn and just have community and do action steps. And then we also have YAC, which is our Youth Advisory Council, which acts as our like youth board and helping us make decisions on where to go.
And as far as kind of our organizational and business goes, we do a lot of consulting and seeing what people want. But some of our most popular trainings are building inclusive work and service environments. That's usually for all employees at an organization. And those can range in, length of time. I think we like 2 to 4 hours kind of. In the virtual world, not more than 4 or 4 all together virtually. It gets to be a lot. But it's always fun when we do that in person and it's 4 hours. And then we also have some kind of new implicit bias awareness where you're, investigating your own bias and learning about how to kind of correct it. And also getting comfortable with conflict series, which I guess that's more community, but that will be coming up on April 30th. We have a getting comfortable with conflict virtual training led by our Director of Synergistic Operations, Brooke Core, who is a certified mediator and conflict coach. She's really been the one in injecting this, implicit bias awareness and conflict coaching into our work. But we also do, like I said, READY for racial equity, access, diversity, inclusion assessments for people. People have been very interested in that recently. And those are longer form, meeting and doing trainings, but also working on people's policies and hiring practices to try and make them more equitable. And then as far as our community goes, we have community events, like I said, the Getting Comfortable with Conflict training coming up. And then also MLK Day, Diversity Day, and then random trainings here and there, kind of spread out when we decide we want to do them or something happens where we want to address something in the community.
I also forgot to mention we're also the Montana GSA network contact. And so if anybody in a school wants to start a GSA or needs resources for that, we are the person to come to.
So what does GSA stand for everyone?
Yeah, it stands for Gender Sexuality Alliance. It was formerly known as Gay Straight Alliance, but a lot of youth were like, that's not inclusive for everybody. So a lot of GSAs have changed to Gender Sexuality Alliances.
Great. So what is the contact information for you where people can reach you out, and where can they learn more about your programs for your website?
Yeah, so our website is www.empowermt.org. And then you can always email us. Our main email is info at empowermt.org.
Mhm.
Great. Well, thank you for answering all those questions. I'm now going to turn it over to Sophie to ask some questions that people have been posting and would like to hear answers to.
Thanks for the introduction, Kim, and thank you both so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. We have some great questions coming in from the audience, and if there's folks out there who have more questions, go ahead and throw them in, either the chat or the Q&A. We'll make sure they get answers. So the first question, do you see differences in intergenerational understanding or lack thereof of these issues? What strategies can work for younger versus older community members?
That is a really great question. Yeah, I think from my experience working with youth is that at least the youth that I work with, they know a lot. Like they have so many resources that, like even I didn't have growing up. And so they can just quick look up something and read all these articles about something that's happening. And they're like, okay, like what are we gonna do? Like let's do some action items. And I think that's just a little bit different. With other generations, they're more like want to talk it out. And I think the young people that I work with are like, no, let's do something now. So I think that's in my experience, just different generationally, and both are great. Yeah.
Awesome. Our next question kind of has to deal with that too. So the COVID-19 epidemic has been really isolating for many Montanans. How have the youth in your youth groups been dealing with COVID-19? How has your work with youth changed since COVID-19?
Yeah, all of our youth programs at the moment are virtually, so either on Zoom or Google Meet. And I think it is a little bit difficult, especially more at the front end of the pandemic, because youth were like already doing school online and they're like looking at their screens for however long during the day, and then for them to like then hop on a Meet or a Zoom to do another like hour of talking to your screen, I think is really difficult. It's like I'm feeling that way too. I'm like, oh, another Zoom, I gotta go on another Zoom. And so I think it's just hard for them, and I think it is, especially as a BIPOC person, a young BIPOC person, like it's already so isolating. And then for some of them, they're doing the online school, so they don't get that interaction with their peers. And so I think it's been a very isolating experience, but I think that's why it's great that we do have our programs and we do say, like, come when you need it, come when you want. You don't have to come like every week. It's really, we're just there for you whenever you need or want or any support. So yeah, I definitely think the youth engagement has changed since the pandemic. But I think there's also a lot of great learnings, I think that having things virtually has allowed people from not just Missoula to come and interact with us when we normally would have to travel, or like they wouldn't be able to travel here. So I think the whole virtual thing caused by the pandemic has been great too.
That's great. Thank you for that answer. Next question. How can your programs help businesses, and what difference does that make for employees and consumers?
Yeah, so what has been really great about our programs is we tailor it to individual businesses. So it's definitely whatever they want to address and talk about. We even did sexual harassment training for the Top Hat recently, which is something that we usually don't ever do. And, we will learn and we'll adapt and we'll take our knowledge and training, because it is pretty generalized, and kind of adapt it to whatever situation people need it to be.
Awesome. That's great to hear. That's a resource in our community for businesses. Next question. What do you feel is the impact of the obvious yet cloaked attitudes in the legislature with respect to trans youth and making laws that negatively affect them? What can be done to counter that?
That's a difficult question.
Yeah, that is. I don't know, like I just always go back to that support and just really having conversations with youth and what they're feeling, and not even just to, respond back, but sometimes you just need somebody to like let you vent. And so I think that's what's great about our youth programs, and that we like, I don't know, we have this curriculum set, or like we have plans for a week, but really like whatever the youth need, we can drop it and be like, yeah, let's talk about that. Or let's make some curriculum based on what you want to learn. And so I think right now, yeah, I think it's just really allowing the space for youth, and not pushing the issue of like, hey, like, let's talk about this, but really like whatever they want is what we're going to give them.
Yeah, because what's going on in the legislature is so political. It's legislation put out by the Heritage Foundation, and all of the states have the same bills that are going through. And I think it's just that, for a lot of people, I think that are kind of consumed in that rural world, they might not know anybody that is trans. And so it's easy for them to pick out this group and say, oh, you're different, and we don't want to associate with you or whatever. And I think building up those youth leaders and, encouraging them to share their stories is that first step to getting the real stories out there and getting people meeting people that are different than them.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And kind of a follow-up question to that too, what advice do you two have for folks who are maybe going virtually or in person to Helena to testify against these bills? I mean, sometimes it's hard to even come up with testimony, because I don't understand how someone could desire to legislate someone's body like that. What are your kind of insights onto how to create a testimony that will really resonate with someone who might not view things the same way that you do?
Yeah. I think a piece of advice for me, we have a program every month called Virtual Empowering Youth Leadership Series. And I think last month we had Sayusa from Youth Forward do an ethical storytelling session. And one of the things that she said about storytelling is just like, you don't have to hyperbolize, like your story is enough. Like you don't have to really like dramatize anything. Your story is your story, and that makes it good. And so I guess I would give that piece of information or helpful tip. I don't know if it's helpful at all, but it was really impactful for me, because I tend to, in the experiences that I have or the discrimination that I face, I tend to be like, okay, like I really need to like get it across to them that this is bad. And therefore I'm like, I need to use these like really powerful words that'll like really make them understand. And I don't have to do that. I can say I'm hurt by this because of X, Y, and Z, and that's enough.
Yeah, most of our trainings are focused around kind of looking at your own identities and then learning how some of those identities may face types of oppression, and then how that connects to other people that, are suffering similar types of oppression or other types of oppression, and making that connection that way. And I think, yeah, telling your story is the most important way to do that, just in plain simple terms, because I think that is the simplest way that it might resonate with someone else as, oh, it's like this time I was bullied, or this time I was oppressed, or this time that, I didn't have a say in something.
Awesome. So we only have one more question that I can see right now, but if folks have more questions and want to get them answered, go ahead and put them in. It's kind of last call for questions. So the last question that I can see here has to do with youth advocacy. Obviously, you all are really engaged in supporting young people across Montana. And this question is asking, how do we support young activists in Montana? I know, especially seeing some of this powerful testimony at the legislature, it takes an incredible amount of kind of emotional vulnerability to be able to do that and to speak your truth. So what do you guys think as far as, us supporting young activists across Montana and how we can best do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we were just having a conversation about this. I think that knowing that youth leaders have experience and that their experience is valid, and they have a voice to share. A lot of young people, and I mean, when I think about it, and I think about being in high school, I was seeing all of these injustices in the world, and so are youth now. And it might even be worse now with, everything that's going on and gun violence and all of that. The increase of that. And I think that, giving them a platform and letting them have the same space that we give adults to be activists, to speak, to tell their truth, is really important.
Yeah, I would say, I think it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, like youth are our future, like they're gonna be great leaders in the future. Like, no, they're leaders now. They are equipped with knowledge and skills now. And so I would just say to just really amplify their voices, and believe them, give them credit. I'd also say for like, I'm really passionate about giving youth like jobs. Like if you're in a business, like create a youth job, like that's going to be impactful and that will gain them skills. Like, because I always felt as a young person, like, oh, like when I get out of high school, that's when I'll be able to have a job that matters, or like gain skills that like I don't need to know. Like, no, like I can do that in high school or middle school. So I would just say, create youth jobs. That's my little plug there.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for answering all those questions so thoroughly, and for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Kim so that we can ask those final 4 questions.
Oh, great. Thank you, Sophie. And thank you both for answering those. Before we move on to the last questions, I just had 2 questions I wanted to follow up on with all the great programming you have. You said there's a monthly training for youth. If somebody wants to tell, their kid about it, or maybe they want to watch it, what do they do?
Yes. So you can go to our website, and like Kelsey said, just look up Empower Montana, you'll find our website. And there's like a little tab that says like youth in schools, and all of that information is there. Our next virtual Empowering Youth Leadership series is next Monday. It's just a Zoom link that you can sign up for. And we're going to be doing a Two-Spirit 101 brought to you by Transvisible, which is really exciting. So yeah, if there's any programs anyone's interested or anything, you can just go to our website and find out how to sign up or contact us about it.
And there is a lot of tabs at the top. We have youth in schools, community, organization, and you can get lost in that. So if you have any questions, you can always email us at info@empowermg.org.
Great. Thanks for that. And my last question. So if you're a parent or even a non-parent and you're worried about how like the terrible laws the Montana legislature has been passing that are clearly discriminatory and hate-filled, and you're worried about how those impact youth, what can you do to have Empower Montana or your programming included in local schools?
Yeah, so we work with quite a few local schools. We have contacts at most of the schools, but you can always call us or email us to request a training and talk to us. We do a bunch of different versions of our educator trainings. We work with youth. We find it's really helpful to give youth these tools to stop this oppression and violence in their schools, because they're the ones that are typically seeing it. Educators don't always see it. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've also done a training that was really awesome a couple of years ago at Meadow Hill, where we did like teachers and educators and students kind of all together just on one issue that they were really focusing on at that time. And it was awesome because we got to split those groups up and then come together, and the youth were like on it. They're like, listen up, like we have all these things that we see that can improve in our school, and let me tell you about it. So again, just listening to youth. And so yeah, like Kelsey said, we can tailor trainings towards that school or anything like that.
And we never turn away youth in schools based on costs. So
And are these available statewide, or is it just more local? Statewide. So everywhere in the state? Okay, everyone.
Yep.
Everyone.
We used to travel, when we did travel, about 9,000 miles a year going to places across Montana. We worked on all of the reservations and with all the tribal communities. And yeah, we go everywhere.
Well, you're a great resource for Montana, so thank you for that. All right, our final 4 questions now are intended to let people get to know you both a little bit better. Who wants to go first?
I can.
Oh, thank goodness.
Because I know what they are.
Yeah. Kelsey, what is a podcast you're listening to that you'd recommend to others?
This one I was excited about. I have two. One is Stolen, which is the podcast that covers Jermaine Charlo's case. And so obviously, you know, content warning, trigger warning there, but very good. The journalist who does it, her name is Connie Walker, and she's an Indigenous reporter in Canada, and she's very good. And then the second is called Death in the West, which is about the murder of Frank Little in 1917 in Butte, who's a IWW organizer. But there's just some really wild organizing history that goes on in that. And that's more history, and it's not as much true crime. Obviously, I'm a big true crime person.
And that one was produced locally in Missoula, and they have a lot of Missoula sponsors. So it's actually really local centric, which is kind of cool.
Yes.
So, all right, Sierra, your turn. What is a podcast you're listening to, if you're listening to one, that you'd recommend to others?
Yes, I listen to this podcast called Still Processing, and it's by two Black journalists at the New York Times, and they just talk about things that are on their mind, but through like a racial lens, and it's just, yeah, really cool and amazing.
Cool. All right, Kelsey, who's your favorite singer?
I really love, his name is Josh Ritter. He's from Idaho, actually, originally, but he does, you know, indie, folk, rock, that kind of stuff. Whenever he comes to Missoula, which he does a bit since his parents were still living in Idaho, I go see him. I just love him.
Good to know. All right, Sierra, how about you? Who's your favorite singer?
This is too difficult for me, honestly. I couldn't tell you. I really don't. I like so many different genres of music. It's too much. It really is. I really love Beyonce. She's like my girl. But then I love like Mumford and Sons. But then I love like Luther Vandross. So like I'm all over the place and truly could not give an answer. Any answer I would give would be false. So
you gave us 3, so we'll call that the answer. All right, Kelsey, where's your favorite place to go in Montana?
I really love Glacier, and then locally, I love to go to Patty Canyon. I grew up walking around there with my parents. They take me up there, and just any hike that's up around there. There's so many different trails. Even if it's packed, you can usually get by without seeing too many people. And if there's a lot of people, and you just take a different trail, and then you don't see anybody. So
Nice.
I like that.
Nice. How about you, Sierra? Where's your favorite place to go?
Oof. Yeah, I'd say I love Glacier. I like going to Whitefish to go to the lake in the summer. In Missoula, I really love just like taking a drive, like Blue Mountain, like that back road. It's just a nice calming drive. I like that a lot.
Nice. I have to say, we've gotten a lot of votes for Glacier being a favorite place, but hardly any for Yellowstone. So in the whole Glacier versus Yellowstone realm, I think Glacier is clearly winning, just so you all know. All right, Kelsey, what's the best advice you were ever given?
Oh my, well, I feel like we have this one all the time, and I never know what to say. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, I think I was answering this question at a staff meeting. I don't know that it was really advice, but my parents were born and raised in Montana too. And my mom has always given me these tips about driving. And one of them is when it's snowing and you can't even see the road, you just Zen drive, which is, you know where the road is and you hold on and you just keep going.
Hold on and keep going. That's good advice. All right, Sarah, what about you? What's some of the best advice you were ever given?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I've been given was when I was in college, and my professor was saying that she tells herself whenever she meets with clients, first thought wrong. And so really just, you have these like prejudices about people, or like even just thoughts that you didn't know, like you're like, oh, why did I think that? And so I always try to meet people, and when I meet them, you have those thoughts like, oh, I don't like this person. Oh, they're this, they're that. And I always try to say, first thought wrong. Like, I need to get to know them before like I make any judgments about them. So I really always try and keep that with me.
Nice. Well, that's great advice from both of you. I'd just like to say thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you for the work you're doing. It's really valuable, and I hope people take advantage of it. Your website, for everyone, if they don't remember, it's empowermontana.com.
Org.
Empowermontana.org. And then the email is info@empowermontana.org. So that's how they can reach out to you. Thank you both so much for being on today.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And to everyone listening today, thank you for listening. We're hosting these talks to provide an opportunity to hear from different people about the important work they're doing and the organizations in our state, and also to let you learn how you can become involved in shaping your communities. And Empower Montana today that you heard from actually does a lot of important work that's really relevant to what we're seeing today. If you'd like to reach us at the Public Policy Institute of the Rockies, you can go to our website, publicpolicyinstituteoftherockies.com, on Facebook at Public Policy Institute of the Rockies, Twitter at Policy Rockies, Instagram at PPI of the Rockies, and email us with whatever you want, especially if it's positive and you have a suggestion for a guest, at info@ppir.org. If you want to listen to this episode again or any of the past talks, you can find our podcast available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And the show is recorded and is going to be available on MCAT also on television, local access channel 189 on Tuesdays at 8:30 and Fridays at 6:30. So thank you all for listening. Thank you again to our guests for being here today. And we'll be back next week with another great episode. Tune in then, and let's keep moving Montana forward together.